Sarah Paulson, Oprah Winfrey, Dolly Parton, and Jennifer Aniston. What do all of these women have in common? They are all voluntarily child-free. My girlfriends and I would often have discussions about our futures and particularly having children. I had that one friend that would always show me pictures of her babysitting her aunt's children, send me cute TikToks of newborns, and she would tell me, I have such baby fever. I can't wait until one day I have my own children. I never really related to her. And I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm not like the other girls. I felt guilty for not wanting children. I tell myself, I'll get over it. It's only natural that women are caring creatures that naturally want to mother. But why do I feel like I should get over it? I think it is because not enough women have yet come out and loudly shared experiences for their regret of motherhood, or of losing a part of themselves after becoming mothers, or of not wanting to become mothers in general. And we also have very few role models of voluntarily child-free women. Therefore, today I want to talk about maternal regret, based on two broad reasons. Firstly, the emotional, and secondly, the practical causes. To begin, let's talk about the way that women express maternal regret. The taboo nature of maternal regret is reflected in some of the discussion title formulations in the largest UK parenting website called Mumsnet. Discussion titles are named as Deep Breath, I Regret Having Children, or Is it possible to regret having children? Full stop. Equally, 7 of the 21 threads are in the Am I being unreasonable subform, which sort of suggests that the posters themselves believe that their feelings towards motherhood are sort of transgressive. Many of the discussions in Mumsnet, and more generally in society, try to disalign women from feelings of maternal regret. This is done by twisting one's emotions and, for example, saying, well, regret doesn't really sound like the word that you mean, and trying to reposition these feelings as, for example, the grief at a loss of a previous life. This is in part due to natalism, which actively undermines non-mothers. Stories that try to explain how after birthing children, women became different people, and their life experience suddenly got more satisfactory and fuller. Therefore, by society at large, a non-mother is considered to be deficient, and at times a non-person, generalizing every woman's experience and not taking into account that for some women, motherhood is draining and not more satisfactory than non-motherhood. The idea that women have a normal and natural life trajectory draws some of its power from the idea of biological determinism, which naturally leads to motherhood. But it also relies heavily on cultural logics that are instilled both in women and men, that life is essentially a series of progressive stages that everyone has to follow, with school, work, marriage, and parenthood. It is actually interesting how we see parenthood as an obligation. We have one camp of people that say, I will have children in my 20s so then I can really enjoy my 40s and my 50s. And then we have the other camp of people that completely disagree and say, no, I'll have children in my 30s so then I can enjoy my wild 20s. But let me ask you a question. Why can't we enjoy all of our lives while still having children, or not? Both options are valid. Some people in the audience might pose me a rebuttal and tell me that women today have the free choice whether to become mothers or not. After all, we live in a progressive society. Orna Donath, a writer who did a study on women that regret motherhood, would tell you that the concept of free choice is quite different than that. She would say that the concept of free choice must necessarily include reflections about that choice's costs and benefits, as well as the existence of other options. And this is the most important part, that will not be followed by sanctions or punishments. So why do employers still assume that women in their 20s will have children? Thus, they're less reliable employees. Why does your family still nag you about your biological clock ticking every time you come back home for the holidays? Why do so many mothers around the world still have the mental and physical strain of not only being perfect mothers, but also managers and chauffeurs of their children, private chefs, house cleaners, amazing employees at their paid jobs, and fun socialites with sexy bodies, all at once? Of course, in some parts of the world, women have got a lot of liberation. Many women today have access to education, the labor force, their own finances and opinions. But the attitudes and ideas regarding a woman's role in society and the family have hardly changed. Research done in developed countries in 2018 show that in Eastern Europe, more than 50% of the people interviewed believe that the male breadwinner model, where the man works full-time and the mother stays at home, is the best way to divide paid and unpaid labor in the household. Time-use surveys from 18 middle and high-income countries conducted by the International Monetary Fund show that women on average spend 2 hours more than men preparing food and cleaning. They also spend significantly more time shopping and taking care of the children, all of which makes motherhood harder than it should be. As we now talked about the emotional and often unobservable pressure and hardship surrounding having children, I want to now move on to talk about the practical and financial aspect that leads to some women regretting motherhood. Research done in Australia show that experiences of stress and regret that came with teen motherhood was associated with the lack of social support before and after the baby's birth. A similar study done in South Africa showed that teenage mothers were particularly conscious of their lack of economic power as teenage mothers in school. Some of them regretted the fact that they had to stay in abusive situations because of their financial dependence, and many of them stated aspirations to become financially independent. These findings are particularly relevant to the discussions surrounding childcare subsidies in the United States. The Journal of Family and Economic Issues studied how childcare subsidies affect mothers' educational attainment in the United States. Unsurprisingly, they found that childcare subsidies increase mothers' educational attainment, especially if their children are younger than 2 years old and if the mothers have low education levels to start with or are not in school yet. For many women, the transition into motherhood is proof of their worthiness as human beings. On the other side, they hope to find acceptance into the communities that they have been excluded from before giving birth. Another great example of how financial reasons impact motherhood is the dowry system that still persists in some parts of India. The dowry relates to the durable goods, cash, or property that the bride's family gives to the groom and his family as a condition of marriage. In this system, if a woman wants to have a stable financial situation and a normal social status, she has to sell herself to the man and his family, birth children, and become a housewife. In this unequal power relationship, many of these women face domestic abuse, according to the United Nations Women Entity. There's also the practice of bride buying, in which a woman's family sells her to human traffickers. So then she could be exported to richer parts of India and sold as a wife. We now talked about the many issues surrounding motherhood. So I want to give you a couple of policies that would help mothers, apart from the ones I already mentioned beforehand. We need to do two main things. Firstly, we need to take away the burden of unpaid social labor that is predominantly put on women. Secondly, we need to give mothers more social and financial help. Of course, there's nuance in regards to the tools that we would use depending on a country's economic and cultural standards. In the developed world, this could look like transferring the unpaid tasks to paid workers, free and accessible provision of childcare, extending the working time of kindergartens so that women don't have to quit their jobs or take up part-time jobs to pick up their child from school. Also, one more policy that we crucially need to reform today is paid paternity leave. Let me draw your attention to something. According to the International Labor Organization, paid paternity leave, on average, is 7 days long, a week long, whereas paid maternity leave is 106 days. In order to improve the situation, we need to equalize them for both parents and as well forbid fathers from simply transferring their entitlement to mothers. In the developing world, fighting structural unemployment, but also investments in water, sanitation, electricity, and transport are really crucial to allow for the engines of liberation that allow poor women to do less of the very low productivity tasks, such as fetching water. Many girls and women that live in rural areas spend a lot of their time collecting wood and other fuels, also grinding and pounding food grains by hand. For example, the new labor forum suggested that rural electrification in South Africa increased women's participation in paid labor by 9%. Even if we implemented all of these policies, we still need to do one more thing, and that is change our opinions about gender. Alison Jaggard suggests that in Ghana, a wife does 80% of the housework, even if she brings home all of the income. In France, a wife does 50% of the housework, even if she brings home all of the income. Women cannot expect for men to take up housework if we do not change our opinions about gender roles. Overall, loudly sharing experiences where women have felt regret of motherhood may really help us refute the notion that mothers are objects whose aim is to constantly serve others, to link their self-worth to the well-being of their children, and to instead acknowledge mothers and women as owners of their own bodies, thoughts, imagination, and memories, and people who are very well capable, without anyone else's help, to evaluate whether the experience of motherhood is something that is worthwhile for them or it is not. We also need to allow women to feel the regret of motherhood full stop, instead of calling it ambivalence or a couple of hard moments. Pro-women policies and discourse that I mentioned in my speech would really help us liberate women from the cages of societal expectations and make them worthy and thriving people without having children. I want you to look at voluntarily child-free women, such as Sarah Paulson, Oprah Winfrey, Dolly Parton, and Jennifer Aniston, and ask yourself, are these women not full as human beings? Let yourself be unmuted by the stories of thousands of women around the world who, if given the opportunity to turn back time, would not have children. Thank you.